Hello, I'm going to attempt to get through a 9/11 video on my experiences at the World Trade Center 20 years ago tomorrow, as today is September 10th, 2021. And I keep making this video, but I'm having some kind of technical issue with my camera. I didn't want to rush through this. So, how did I end up at the World Trade Center in 2001, at the World Trade Center site? I was active duty Army for almost 14 years as an infantry training sergeant and leader on the enlisted side. And I did some thinking. You know, I figured I was going to retire at about age 41, 42, and I thought, what am I going to do then? I have a high school diploma, and I've got a lot of work experience in the Army infantry, and things like being a parachutist and serving in 82nd Airborne, and things like that. You know, they hold some clout in military circles, but in civilian life, you know, hey, you want to order fries with that? You know, it's about what it's worth, honestly, to most, except other veterans. Veterans hire vets as a rule. So I decided to get out. I gave it a lot of thought. And I decided to go ahead and get out of the active duty Army and go to college, learn a whole new career, one that I could work well into my 60s, and finish up my 20 years in the military in the New York Army National Guard. And that way I would still get paid credit for my almost 14 years of active duty. You know, I would have to wait till I'm 60 to start drawing that pension. Whereas if I would have just stayed active duty, I would have started drawing a full pension the day I retired. So it was kind of a calculated gamble that I took to go to college and leave the relative safety net of my active duty position. And I did that. I was doing quite well in the Army. Actually, I enjoyed it. I really felt at home in the military, honestly. And it's not at all like they make it look like on the movies. You know, unless you just don't fit in. I don't know. It's not a bad life. You know, as long as you keep living in it. So I did just that. I got out of active duty Army and I relocated to central New York because that's where my parents had moved while I was in the I was away. And I used to come home on leave, and I thought it was very nice where they lived. And, you know, so I thought I'd get reacquainted with my parents. I'd been away for a while and go to college at Cortland. They had a SUNY Cortland, State University of New York, in Cortland, New York, had a teaching curriculum. And they also had a National Guard unit there. And they were tanks, they weren't infantry, I was infantry. But I decided, well, it can't be too bad riding around in tanks, you know, after walking and carrying everything on my back for all these years. Come to find out that armor's very difficult. Physically, it's not a walk in the park by a long shot. I don't want to digress too much in this. I don't know if this camera's going to time out on me again, but so I did just that. I enlisted transferred over into the New York Army National Guard and started going to college at SUNY Cortland full-time. And I was a single dad too at the time, and I was paying my child support pretty much and working. So I was holding down work late at night, early in mornings. I was serving the New York Army National Guard. I was a single parent at that time to my son, Tim, and I was going to college full-time and keeping my GPA where it's supposed to be. Fast forward to 2001, September. I was in my final semester of my Master's in Arts to teach English, and in my 19th year of military service. And I was student teaching at Cato Meridian High School which is a small farming town in central New York, peaceful place. And I remember riding into work that morning, September 11th. It was a cloudless summer day, very beautiful Indian summer weather, very warm. I remember noticing the corn was getting quite tall. The apples were looking ripe, and 45-minute drive in from my town to where I was student teaching. And it was just a beautiful summer. It was drawing to a close in a very beautiful way. It was lovely weather out. And I'm teaching Nathaniel Hawthorne's Scarlet Letter to a bunch of 9th graders. And I went out on a limb and I said, you know something? I'm standing in front of the class. I said, I never really found this book interesting. I'm not going to lie to you. And I took a gamble doing this and I wasn't lying. I didn't think it was a very interesting book, but I would never say that when I'm trying to teach it. But I did this for a reason, because I took a gamble. And one of the girls in my class said, I thought it was very interesting. I liked it a lot. I'm like, really? What did you like about it? She started telling what she liked about it. Then another student said they liked it too, and another student liked it. Next thing you know, everybody's talking about the book in a positive way. And the door opens up, and a teacher that taught down the hall comes in, and she says, the World Trade Center has just been hit by a plane, she said. And I thought she was overreacting. I thought maybe a single-engine little prop plane had hit the trade towers like it did in the 90s. Barely left a scratch on it, though a few people lost their lives, I think. I didn't know. And then she turned on my TV monitor, my class, and then there it was on the big screen. Those terrible images in the clear blue sky like we had where we were sitting. The World Trade Center getting hit with those airliners and all that flame and big plumes of flame. It was horrible. And I was speechless, and my students were speechless, and we all just kind of, young and old alike, you know, were just dumbfounded by what we were seeing on TV. And I just said, well, that'll be all for today's class. And I just went in the back and sat on an empty desk and watched, just like the whole class were just watching TV. And then bang, a second airliner hits. And we knew America was under attack. And nobody knew, you know, what was going on, if there was more to come. We were under attack. And next thing I know, another teacher comes in and she says, Mr. Shank, your Army National Guard unit called and they want you to report immediately to your armory. And so I said goodbye to my students and goodbye to the teachers, and they all wished me luck, and I felt a little heroic, I admit, you know, and I thought I'd be back, but I never saw those people again, and I will tell you why at the end of this video. And I reported to my guard unit later that day, got into uniform, you know, took off the civilian clothes and became Army man, you know. And I got to my guard unit in Cortland, and everybody was there just like me. They all got the same call wherever they were at. They dropped everything, and we all assembled. And everybody felt everybody felt very urgent, you know, we had to get things going. I mean, there was a lot of purpose going on, and I think everybody was pretty well charged up. And most of us were in our 20s or 30s then, you know, a few in their early 40s, and a few teenagers. All coming from all walks in the area. But we were all called up to duty by the New York State governor and to go help out at the Trade Center. So we loaded up on buses. Actually, we spent a day or two doing police training, how to apprehend people, how to search vehicles, how to search packages, what the laws were, what we could and couldn't do legally. Because it would turn out our mission was going to be security directly at the stricken towers. And they needed that there badly, as time would tell when we got there. There's a lot of really oddball bad people trying to get into that site, trust me. So we got down there, and before we got to Manhattan, they stopped us at Peekskill. There was a military installation there where we got more briefings, legal briefings, and we weren't allowed to carry any weapons there. Not even a pocket knife was permitted. I exaggerate not. We didn't need it anyway, honestly. Hope you don't mind me having a beer. my company, Delta Company, 1st of the 127th Armor. That was my company. Our company motto was cold beer. That is to say, there was about 75 soldiers there, give or take 15, 10 or 15. You know, numbers went up and down with recruiting and people getting in and out. But when they called us to attention, like company, platoon, attention, everybody clack, you know, comes to attention. Usually you sound off with, like when I was a paratrooper, it was strike hold. And we'd all, attention, everybody, strike hold. Get about 100 guys yelling that out, you know. We were cold beer, so attention, cold beer. And usually we were a tank unit, it would be something like cold steel. Or something, you know, if you're in the infantry, the armor, or artillery, where your job is directly to kill enemy soldiers, usually you've got that kind of mentality, you know, so it's just what it is. Instead of cold steel, it was cold beer. And our first sergeant, Ken Patch, he let us all vote on that. And very democratic. And cold beer won. And I like that, obviously. That's one thing I liked about, there are things about the serving in the Guard versus the active duty that I liked better than the active duty. And there are certain things about the active duty than the Guard that I preferred. There were some things about the Guard I thought was pretty cool, honestly. So after a couple of days, we all boarded buses, and we had about a 3.5, 4-hour drive from where we were at to get to New York City. And yeah, like I said, we stopped at Peekskill, and then had a few classes, and then bused like 45 minutes from there. And everybody was chattering on the bus. I do remember this. Everybody was very talkative. We were all in uniform. And then somebody said, "There it is." And we looked out the window, and for the first time you could see off in the distance those giant plumes of smoke that were where the World Trade Center was. You could see that for miles and miles away. Gigantic plumes of smoke. And everybody was speechless on the bus when we all saw those plumes of smoke, what we'd been seeing on TV, and then we were driving into it. So we got to Battery Park, and here's a map. You can see Battery Park circled in red, and the World Trade Center site circled in red too, smaller. So the World Trade Center was only a few blocks away from where we were staged at Battery Park. And that Battery Park would be a staging ground for New York Army National Guard, as well as the police, certain police agencies, and certain search and rescue agencies. It was a staging ground for the World Trade Center effort, in short. And we were given these paper orders that we laminated, and we had on a chain that we wore around our neck, exposed out in the open. Picture off. Because these orders were the only thing that said that we had the right to be in there. Because anybody without orders to be in there did not belong there. And you better believe there were a lot of people trying to get into there for a lot of wrong reasons. And so we formed up our company, that is to say, about 75 men and one female soldier, Crandall, who did a great job there. Everybody did a great job there, hands down, everybody. I was very proud to serve with these people. And we marched in, and Sergeant Patch was calling the cadence. I marched troops pretty well, but he was a senior enlisted man there, and I was a second. And we were all in step pretty well, you know, and you could really hear those Army boots in the city, you know, marching down. And somebody told us that we were the first time. There were a lot of news cameras on us and stuff. That it was the first time since the Civil War the U.S. Army has marched down that street in formation. So that was a distinction. But once we got closer to the towers, it was all smoke and dust, and there was debris laying all over the road where you couldn't march. You just had to step over things and around things. It was a mess. Patch put us in route step, which is to say you're just walking. There's no 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, left, right, none of that. You just walk at route step. So I stood back from the formation. At this point in time, I stepped back and I took my camera out and I took this picture. And that is the picture I took of my company on day one when they marched into the World Trade Center site. And like I said, at this point we weren't a formation. We were at route step, which means you're just walking. And we all you could see the pink respirators they gave us to breathe in some of these that nobody wore because it was hot and we were working hard. We were there 16, 17 hours a day. And nobody told us that the dust and smoke was full of asbestos and stuff. Because now I get letters every day, or not every day, but routinely saying I've been identified as an at-risk person for being exposed to that stuff down there. Picture off. So we got in there, first impressions. I wrote all this down. I wrote all this down years ago. And so I just read it last night again to refresh myself and today so I don't forget anything. And I don't want to take forever with this either. First impressions. I'm a country boy. Everybody in my unit are country people. Just being in Manhattan alone is quite a... Like if you took somebody who lived in the city their whole life and put them out in the woods with me, they'd be terrified. They'd be afraid of bears. They'd be afraid of everything. Things that... And I'm at ease. But you put me in a city, I'm lost. Honestly, at least for a while. And I mean, it was just quite a thrill to be in Manhattan. But in this situation was like surreal. I mean, the World Trade Center, when you look up and you saw the skyscrapers around where the trade towers were, there were bits of the Trade Center stuck into the side of them and hanging out. The buildings that were still standing had damage. And they had like jagged pieces of the World Trade Center sticking, hanging out of them. You didn't know if it was going to fall off. Way up there, way up there. And there was flame and smoke, and there was cops, police all over the place, and firemen everywhere digging around through the rubble. People with dogs. It was still a search and rescue effort then. But to my knowledge, while we were there, the only thing that they found alive there was a cat that somehow survived the whole thing while we were there. And that cat had been in there for quite a while, and that cat came out alive. That's the only thing. So we walked up and around the perimeter, which had police officers at every alleyway, every road, so nobody could get in. The roads and the alleys were all closed off, and a police officer came up to me, and he asked me, he says, "Where do you want me to position my men?" I'm like, "What do you mean?" You know, this was kind of shock for me, because just a couple days before I was teaching Nathaniel Hawthorne in high school in a farming town in upstate New York. Now I'm at the World Trade Center in Manhattan in uniform, and I've got a New York City cop asking me where to put his police officers. And he said, well, we're under martial law, so the military takes precedence. So, you know, I had a job to do. I was actually kind of the senior enlisted man in charge of the people on the ground. That's not to say I was the senior enlisted man. First Sergeant Patch was that person. But he was off handling other logistic things for the company behind the scenes, and I was kind of the senior enlisted guy just there with our soldiers, doing the job, you know, with them shoulder to shoulder. We all worked hard. All our NCOs and officers, it was everybody. There really wasn't any rank there. We all just kind of just did our job together, you know. So it wasn't really a rank thing. So I told this policeman, I looked around, and there was cops, New York City police everywhere, and state troopers. And I thought, well, they've got it. I just said, you just keep them right where they are. And I went and augmented every road and sidewalk that the police already were manning. I put like 2 or 3 guys, you 2 are here, and right down there, and you 2 are here, you 2 are there, you 2 are there. And that was it. And what they do, you stopped cars, you checked people who were trying to get in, make sure they had the right papers to get in. You just couldn't walk into there. And there were people, when I say there, I mean ground zero. We were at ground zero, right at the stricken tower site. And there were people all over the place looking in at us. I mean, news cameras from everywhere, and just crowds of people all around the place. And there were people grieving. We eventually had a chain link fence put up, and people were posting pictures of their loved ones on that. Have you seen this person? Have you seen this person? Or I miss you, love you. It's going to be hard for me to tell some of this. It's really, I think every one of us there had something happen. When I talked to the guys down the road, that really, they got some PTSD from it. And I did definitely have my moment that I thought I weathered up pretty well. I thought I handled it pretty well emotionally. But I had something happen that really, really floored me. And I'm going to get into it, and I might not be able to hold it together. So, we were all busy, really busy, stopping people, checking papers. I was going around trying to get food and cigarettes and things like that for my soldiers. There's food venues everywhere. The Army didn't feed us, really. They weren't set up for this, but they didn't need to. All the venues were giving free food to all of us, first responders, firemen, soldiers, police. I'm saying like Starbucks was open 24/7. And all the coffee and things you could want. And McDonald's had a site there. All the food you could want. They had a big, like a big tent set up in there. I mean, really big operation. And they were putting out food. The Red Cross was there. And they were putting out food and water and drinks and cigarettes. Yes, there were cigarettes. There's a guy dressed up like a cowboy. He worked for Marlboro, I think, Philip Morris. And he was giving out cartons of cigarettes to all the first responders. So everybody had all the food and water, and if you smoked cigarettes, you could want. Getting sleep was a challenge. And, what did we do there? There's things, we did all kinds of, mostly security, road checks and roadblocks, stopped traffic, directed traffic, assisted in a lot of arrests of people that shouldn't have been in there. You know, there were firemen coming in and out 24/7. And they lost, at the trade towers, there were 2,606 people killed total. 2,606. I want to make sure I get these numbers right. Of those 2,606 people that were killed on September 11th, 344 were firemen, and 71 were law officers, police officers. 344 firemen, 71 law officers, and the rest were just people that showed up for work that day or were killed by falling things, you know, and people dying every day from diseases exposed to all that toxic stuff. We weren't allowed to take pictures. They didn't want us to take pictures. The firemen there, they were pretty shooken up. They were shaken up pretty badly. 344 of their comrades were in that pile, which looked like just a big pile of concrete and steel and chairs and office stuff and bits of clothing, and it was on fire here and there, and the pile itself went up about 2 or 3 floors up, I think, off the ground. It's like a big mountain. And here's a couple of pictures. I did manage to get some pictures very discreetly. Here's a picture of the site somebody else took. I didn't take this one. That was probably taken about 3 weeks after. When we first got there, it was all still on fire and a lot of smoke. And 2 or 3 weeks later, the fires were finally out. It took them a long time for the fire to go out there. Those airliners each had 20,000 gallons of fuel in them. 20,000 gallons of fuel. That's 40,000 gallons of fuel in those airliners. So it burned and burned and burned for a long time. And the World Trade Center went down below ground. I don't know how many floors. There were offices below ground. There's like a big jagged hole in the concrete. You could see the offices and down below, and there's flames like something off Dante or something, Inferno. It was a mess, and I picture off of that. And what do I remember from it? We worked hard. We didn't get much sleep. They had a problem figuring out where we were going to sleep at first. They tried to accommodate it. After 16 days, we'd all march back to after 16 hours a day, we'd march back to Battery Park, load up on buses. Not at Battery Park, no, we'd load up on ferries, and they took us to Governor Island. Fort Hamilton, I believe, was there. And we got no sleep. Here's a picture of me on a ferry going to Fort Hamilton, the island, Fort Hamilton, which is on Governor Island. That's me 20 years ago, very tired. And I mean, I was really just tired, really burned out there. Not a very good picture, but it's me. Yeah. And so we got to Fort Hamilton, and we got even less sleep. We didn't just go there and go to sleep. We had to find our barracks, what we were in. There was an old Army barracks that nobody had been in since the 60s. Housing and stuff there, military. We got no sleep. We were lucky if we got 2 hours of sleep a day. Then somebody had the bright idea to put us on buses and take us to the U.S. Navy hospital ship, the USS Comfort, which to me was anything but comfort. Here's a picture of me on a bus after a very harrowing day for me. And you can see the stress on my face, I think. It's me standing up there in the center 20 years ago. And yeah, a very stressful day. Everybody's on the bus. Everybody's pretty burned out, pretty tired. We go to the USS Comfort, thinking we're going to get some sleep there somehow, and we just had to stand in line for another hour while they checked every one of us in. I mean, they being Marines that were with the USS Comfort, checked our bags, checked our ID cards. And by the time we got in there, then they marched us to the very bottom of that ship, the very lowest hold of that ship. There were some bunks set up. And let me tell you, there was ankle-deep bilge seawater in the room they put us in. Ankle-deep bilge water. There was no sleeping in that place. Before we knew it, we had to leave and go back to duty at the Trade Center. Virtually no sleep. For me, anyway. I don't think anybody slept there. And I got yelled at by, I didn't know the Navy customs. I didn't let a woman officer, you're supposed to stand aside and let them go through the door. The hatch. You know, somebody goes, you stand aside. Somebody yelling at me, and I'm like, haven't slept in ages. You know, and I've been serving down there, going through hardships at the World Trade Center, emotionally. And have somebody on that ship yell at me for not letting a female officer walk through the hatch before me. It was trying. It was very trying for me. I really felt at that time darn glad I didn't join the Navy. No offense to those who served. My dad was in the Navy in World War II. But that experience left me with a bad taste about the Navy and the USS Comfort. So they only did that for us 2 days, and somebody figured out that wasn't working. You know where we got our sleep was at, I think it was St. Paul's Cathedral, which isn't too far from the World Trade Center. I slept there, so did some of the other guys. They kept that place open. I slept on the benches, wooden pews, the bench seats there. I slept really good there. And there was a school in Greenwich next to the World Trade Center that was closed, obviously. And a lot of people were sleeping in there. And some people slept in this makeshift tent out of cardboard, plywood, and whatever you could find. That the soldiers in my unit, a lot of ingenuity, put together this ransack shack with bench seats and all kinds of stuff in it, lights, where we could get out of the public eye and, you know, have a cigarette, take our boots off and stuff, and rest a little bit. And I give the guys in my unit a lot of credit for that. Building that stuff, really good. Those tankers were good at that stuff. And people use that thing for a lot. Even the Secret Service was in and out of there to get out of the public eye. And so that's where we slept. That was a challenge at first. Celebrities were coming in, and I thought they should not be allowed in because you've got people who have loved ones that they're not allowed in, and they're all staring out at the edge, staring out. Think about it. If you lost somebody in there you loved, and you knew that their body was in that pile of crap that's burning, I would probably be standing there just staring at it for days too, you know? Wishing somehow they'd walk out of it. You know they're not going to. But yet they weren't allowed in. All they could do was pin up flowers and photographs on the fence. But if you were a basketball player, or a pop star, or an actress, oh, they let you right in. And I said, no, 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 no. Turn them around. They're not getting in. There's no need to be here. And as soon as I turn around, some officer, not in our unit, somebody I'd never seen before, no, 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 Sergeant, I've got this. Come on in and let me get my picture with you. You know, an NBA player and stuff, and or whoever it might be, some actor or sports figure. I thought that was garbage, honestly. I was totally against it, and I turned a lot of them around until I was directed not to. Some of the people that came in, actually celebrities, did help out. Other ones just wanted a tour of the place, and my soldiers would escort them and give them a tour of the place. They weren't allowed to walk around there unescorted. And the guys in my unit did that. Reluctantly I'd say, Sergeant, whatever, specialist, would you give this person a tour of the site? And they would. Alanis Morissette was one that I remember there, and she helped out. I mean, she served food. They actually started serving food there to all the first responders in the site. And I remember it was about 2 in the morning, and my Lieutenant Knowles, hello, Captain, I don't know what rank you got out at, he really liked her. And I remember he took off his Army helmet, and he had her sign with a marker the top of his helmet, which he undoubtedly still has. Alanis Morissette. He was really thrilled to see her. I spoke to her, and I said, I'd like another scoop of that rice, please. And she said, oh, sure, give me another scoop of rice. So I talked to a guy, he run a TV series, America's Most Wanted. Something, I forgot his name. He's from around here. And he thought he didn't belong in there. He agreed. He was a pretty humble man. So I'm not saying they were all bad. They weren't. The celebrities that were there, they weren't. But I thought if anybody should be allowed in there, it should be people that had loved ones that they lost there. Honestly, that's the thing about that place that really got me, was the grief. I didn't have any paranormal experiences happen there. And there were 2,606 people killed, cut down in their prime of their life there, murdered in a horrible way. I didn't have anything paranormal happen, nothing that I'm aware of. But I felt it. Man, it was like a magnifying glass of grief. It was horrible. The grief is what got me. It was like I was under a magnifying glass, just shining down, focusing all this grief. And that got me. It got me. I think it got everybody. What are some things that happened that I experienced? I was standing out there, didn't have a gut then, my uniform, and in the road, nobody got, right with the trade towers behind us. And I was on TV. Some people said they saw me on the news. Said you look good. Said you look like a statue. Now, I don't want to upset any Muslims or anybody. I'd like to be politically correct about this, but I'm going to tell you what happened. There were 3 men. They looked Islamic. I don't know. They had long white dresses and little white skull caps on, and long black beards. Mediterranean. I don't know how to say this without being offensive to anybody. But they were standing across the road from me, and all 3 of them were standing there, and one of them was looking directly at me, quite intently right at me, making it clear he was staring at me. And when I made eye contact with him, he went like this. He went like that to me, staring at me. You know what I did? I went, pow. Then I winked and smiled. I just went, pow. Lipped out, pow. And then smiled and winked at him. And that guy, his reaction, I'll never forget. He went, oh, his jaw dropped. And he just left. He took off. He left. And then the other guys left. They followed after him. And that was the end of that. I helped apprehend this. One guy came charging through. Another guy dressed up like from the Middle East and yelling something in a kind of an Arabic, I don't know the languages, yelling some stuff in a language I don't know what it was. Sound like Allah Akbar kind of stuff. No offense to anybody. And he came running in so fast, he ran right by our guys, and I tackled the guy. And I tackled him, took him down, and the New York City police were on him in a flash, so I didn't have to wrestle with him or fight with him. They had that guy, and two of them, and they marched him off, and they had one of his arm up behind him like that, and the cop had this guy's arm up behind his back and his other hand on his shoulder. And he's marching him off, and I'm watching, and I seen the cop every now and then gave a little like that to his arm, and that guy's like, ow, ow. I'm like, good. I was pretty upset, you know. We had a guy, one of the guys in my unit, Sean McDonough, was working at a makeshift morgue where if they took a body out, the first thing they did was if they found a body there or parts, I don't want to be macabre here, you know, but I'm going to tell you. They had a place with some sheets and stuff so the public couldn't see it. And that's where they staged the body until they could bring it out in an ambulance, you know. And he come up to me and he said, Sergeant Shanks, Sean McDonough, a professional soldier. He did some active duty time too, young man then. He said, I've got a problem. He said, what do I do? He said he had firemen coming up to him crying on his shoulder, and he's in uniform, and it's not very soldierly to have another man hug you and cry on your shoulder. He says, what do I do? It's not becoming of a soldier. And I said, you know, we're in a different situation here that we weren't trained for. I said, we're grief counselors here, and we were grief counselors. I said, you do whatever you want. If you can handle it, let them. You know, if you do whatever you want. Handle it any way you want. And he said, okay. And he was working in that inner morgue. And he saw some things in there that I won't describe here because it would be tasteless. But they did find some bodies there and firemen and such. And when they found a body, they would take it there. And he was still guard duty in there over bodies and body parts. And he told me some things. Ugh. Man, one fireman found his friend in there, you know, because the guy was still fairly intact. And you knew who he was because he had his fireman's uniform on with his name badge on it. Man, so then they would load these bodies up on an ambulance very discreetly, and they would take the ambulance, would drive out real slow from the Trade Center site, and they'd have Harleys, like 6 Harleys, 2x2s, 6 of them, like horses would be. And these New York City cops on Harleys would escort the ambulance out. And one of the New York City policemen, they asked me because I knew how to yell commands, how to present arms. They have bagpipes and stuff. And the New York City police, the firemen, and the soldiers lined the street sides. And when this ambulance came out with the motorcycles, I called them to attention and present arms. And that's probably my day of fame in my life. And I told them how to do it. When it's a body, because I used to do military funerals. Instead of it be like, present arms, you snap. Order. Actually, I come to attention. Order, arms. And they'd snap down, right? When it's present arms for a deceased soldier, it's it's slow. And then when you order arms, it's down slow. And so I told him to do this, you know, so that's what we did. And so that was kind of a distinction for me. And not claim on it. That's the only distinction I had there, really. Wasn't looking for distinction. Every guy that was there had some things happen like I'm talking about. I'm trying to get on with this. Just talking about stuff that happened. Oh, I remember we didn't let anybody in. Even the firemen had to show their IDs, and they were coming in and out of there. They were there. They had a presence there, and they were pretty tired and burned out, and emotionally really distraught. A lot of them. And this one big guy, he was a captain of the New York City Fire Department there. Big dude. I'm 6 foot tall, and this guy towered over me. I mean, he had these. I got big mitts. I think he could have taken my hand completely in one of his hands and just crushed it. This guy was a giant. And I'm sorry, you don't get in. You've got to show me your ID. And he didn't want to because he was in his fireman's uniform and all his fire company was lined up behind him. So really, he belonged there. I guess I was being a bit of a hard nose, but rules are rules. You've got to show me your ID to get through our checkpoint. He didn't want to. And I wouldn't let him go. I'm sorry, I wouldn't let you go. I think that guy could have just swatted me like a fly out of his way. I didn't budge. I'm a soldier. You know what I mean? I don't back down when I'm wearing a uniform. And so he called me all kinds of names in front of a lot of people. Just for me doing my job, he refused to show me his ID, but I would not let him in. And next thing you know, I had a lot of people watching. Cops and soldiers, civilians, watching this confrontation between me and this guy. So finally, he showed me his ID, and I kept my composure. I said, "You may pass." And he called me some pretty select words and walked on by me. And one of the other firemen came up and he said, "I'm sorry." He said, "That guy's in." He had a few words for him. He said, "He shouldn't have done that to you. You're just doing your job, and we're glad you are." He said, "But he's under a lot of stress, and he's a bit of a anyway." And I said, "It's all right, everybody is." You know, that was the end of that. But then that day we got this. What? This came down through to us, a security intel. And basically what it says is be on the lookout for somebody wearing a New York City fireman's outfit, because a New York City fireman's captain's uniform and ID card were stolen. So be on the lookout for people impersonating New York City firemen. They've got stolen uniforms and, in this case, his ID. So I had every right to stop the man. I remember that. And I X'd out the names on this. It's been 20 years. I guess it wouldn't matter now, but just to be on the safe side. All right, picture off. By the way, here's a picture of my guard unit. Picture. They all assembled for this picture at night. And that's my unit there. And I'm in the very back, towards the left. I'm always, in all these pictures, I'm always in the very back. For some reason, tall guy. Tall one's in the back, I guess. And so that's my unit there. Proud to serve with every one of those guys. Everybody there did an outstanding job, and everyone there has their own stories, honestly. Picture off. If I have any other pictures, I'm just going to flash them up randomly while I'm talking. I want to get through this before my camera turns off. What did I have? I had something there, a couple things that hit me personally, and I'm going to share it with you. And it might not hold up, all right? There was a woman's dress, a very colorful, bright, very cheerful looking woman's dress. You know, the print patterns and colors were kind of cheerful. Skimpy little dress, hanging about 25 feet up, all bloodied and ripped up on a steel girder every day. And it bothered me to see it. It bothered everybody. It just kind of weighed on you. One of the guys in my unit says, "Sergeant Shank, can you please get somebody to take that thing down? And I said, yes. And somebody got up on a ladder and they got it down. The smell of the place, it smelled like burnt wiring with decay mixed in. If you can think of burnt wiring, if you ever smelled like a burnt wiring, like a car dash on fire, an old car, it smelled like burnt wiring, and depending upon the heat or where you were standing, it smelled like rotted flesh. And we were supposed to, sometimes we put Vicks Vapor Rub to kind of block the odor. That didn't really help. On certain warm days, if you got in a certain area, there must have been a lot of deceased in the rubble there, because it got so strong that I almost lost it. I had to, oh God, I hit a pocket. It was very, very strong odor. You don't forget it. And I had to move, get away from there. There's a reason nobody's standing around there. The smell of it was awful. God bless those people. I mean, and then, so we're standing out there. I'm going to wrap this up. For me personally, what really got me a personal moment, and that's what I'm going to share with you. Standing out there all night, we were on there, we got there usually around 6 p.m. and we left about 11 a.m. the next day. Those were our hours. We left, that means there was other Army people that were with us. They took that half from another company. But we had the evening, night, morning shift. Well, I'm standing out there with either by myself, you know, manning a checkpoint, or another soldier, sometimes a cop will be standing there with me. And just standing out there, and like statues, you know, nobody gets through. And there are pictures of people, their loved ones, all over the place, pinned up on the fence, the chain link fence in front of us, and there's a roadblocks, you know, with fence, chain link, and the other, most of the barriers that kept people out were just buildings that were around. But we blocked off all the roadblocks and the alleys and stuff. And all the adjacent buildings were empty. Nobody was allowed in them while I was there. That whole area was emptied out. Stores, bars, homes. This about 2 in the morning, I'm standing out there with this state trooper. Didn't really talk much. New York State trooper, big guy. And this red-haired woman came up, looked like she was in her 20s, late 20s, and she was crying. Oh, God, that really hit me. And she was trying to post a picture of somebody on the fence. And it kept blowing down. It was kind of windy. And we walked up to her. We weren't far away from her. And she says, oh, I'm sorry. And she was crying. And it was late at night. She might have been drinking some, I don't know. And she says, can I put this here? And I said, yeah. And the cop and me says, can you help me with this? And we both, yes, sure. We helped her pin this picture up. God, I don't like doing this. This picture of this chubby looking smiling guy, her fiance. Looked like a picture of him at his office desk. Big smile on his face, because he thought he was probably the luckiest man on earth. He was going to marry the woman taking a picture. And it was just a picture of this chubby looking red-haired guy smiling, looked like he's about 28. And the words were written across it. Said, I love you, I'll miss you forever. And then she walked off down the road in the nighttime. It was raining. And I'd be out there at nights, for every night after that, I'd be standing out there with that cop, New York State trooper, and that picture would blow down. And either he or I would run over and pick it up and put it back on. I think it must have hit him too. Though I didn't let on then either. This all hit me afterwards. And either I or he would get to it, we'd put it right back up there. He must have felt the same way I did. Something in me died. Oh, sorry. I'm only going through this so people don't forget. I think it was about the third night. It blew down. It was about 2 or 3 in the morning. Cold, rainy, miserable. And I went to go get it, and he put his hand on my shoulder, and he stopped me, and I looked at him, kind of speechless, and he said, maybe it's time to let it go. And I looked at him, I said, yeah, I guess you're right. And I watched that picture blow down the street. Actually, it went the same way the woman went when she walked off. Man, that really killed me. That really killed me inside. It really crushed me. Oh, God, I don't like doing this, but I'm going through this so people don't forget the tragedy and the crime of the World Trade Center and the other attacks on 9/11. Never forget. What else happened there that stands out in my mind? Well, the people around there that lived around there, they were grief-stricken. They all knew people that were there. They saw it happen. They were cooking food for us. Some of those people were really some excellent barbecue, alleyway, sidewalk barbecue chefs. They cooked us up the best food, and they fed us. They fed us really well. A lot of them would cry. They said they were really glad to see us. Something about when we marched in there. They were really glad to see us, honestly. One of them told me that there were some New York City guardsmen there, and they were actually almost more afraid of them. They looked like a pretty rough bunch. But they were really glad to see us, and nothing against the New York City troops, guards that were there. I don't know any of them. I'm sure they went through a lot as well, and they breathed all that stuff in, and people are dropping, I hear, 1 a week now from these oddball cancers, skin cancers and stuff, from all that asbestos. Well, so they fed us pretty well. We were fed very well there. Between the other relief, the people that were running venues there, the Red Cross was fantastic. McDonald's ran stuff there for 24/7. Starbucks. I'm not promoting these at all, but they fed us really well, and the people that lived around there fed us really well too, real well. I had some of the best barbecue food I've ever had came out of that area. I found out that city people know how to barbecue pretty well too. I thought it was just a country thing. It is not. But I heard a really grisly story. I'm going to share with you something that's rather macabre, and sorry to anybody. Hats off. I should have taken my hat off in the first place telling this. I should not be telling this story with a hat on. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. I've got the black up for a reason, for mourning. Somebody was really shaken up, a civilian. We were grief counselors there. We really were grief counselors. Something we weren't prepared to do. But what training is there? You just listen to people, and if they want to cry on your shoulder, and sometimes they did, you let them. And firemen crying a lot, breaking down, crying a lot. They were a wreck. Some of them were really a wreck. And so were some of the people that lived around there. Well, this one woman was really shaken up, and she told me, she said she had to talk to somebody about it. And I just happened to be the one. She lived in an apartment, one of the adjacent buildings from the Trade Center, and they finally allowed her, because for a while they were afraid those adjacent buildings, they took some damage too, from all the debris and things flying around. They were afraid for a while that some of those buildings might fall, so they didn't allow anybody to go in there until they felt, they had like a laser set up and a siren system, and they said if you hear these sirens go off, everybody run. That means one of these buildings are going to come down. Big buildings, skyscrapers. Well, this woman said they finally allowed her to go into her apartment to get some things. And she went in there and she told me that she smelled something pretty bad from the minute she got near her door. And she went in there, and this is what she found in her living room. She was apparently pretty much adjacent from the 88, whatever floor the jet hit, one of them. And some passengers were still seated and their airline seats had flown all the way through, all that flame and smoke, and right through and into her building. And they were still in their seats and come crashing through her living room window, and were in her living room, still in their seats. Pretty bad shape. And that poor woman probably still needs counseling from that. And there was a lot of people, not only the 2,606 that were murdered there, there were a lot of people pretty badly shaken up by it. And myself, 20 years later, can't even talk about this stuff, some of it, without breaking down, like, you know. And I haven't even had a beer. Just so you know, I've not been drinking. I just thought I would have a cold beer because that was our company, and I thought it might loosen up, talk a little better. I remember that. What else do I remember from there? My town, they started allowing, towards the end of my shift there, that's to say about 2 weeks later, New York started allowing fire companies from every town in New York State to come through, because it was a fireman thing there. You know, 377, I think, was it, died there. 344. And lo and behold, my little town shows up, their in their ambulance. And we couldn't let everybody in there. There was such a long line of ambulances from towns all over New York State waiting to get in there. I saw my town there as, let them in, right? So they came in, and they came in at night, and they were allowed to stay there overnight and pretty much had to leave. And I recognized most of the guys on there, didn't know them personally, and I asked a couple of my guys to give each one of these guys a tour through the site. That is to say, ground zero. So there's that. I remember that. What else? I don't want to leave any. There's a lot that happened, obviously. I think that woman, that thing got me the worst. That really just, I can still see the look on that guy's face, in that picture, and he looked like he was sitting on top of the world. And her words, I miss you, I love you forever. And seeing her cry like that, she was a mess. She was a mess. Watch her walk off in the night crying. I used to really I actually handled it better than I usually do, if I ever tell this. Let's see, what else? There's probably so much. I'm going to remember things that I wished I'd talked about. We used to, I don't know, we went to Fort Hamilton for a while. Used to take the ferry. I saw the Statue of Liberty. We were like tourists, honestly, in a sense. I mean, we were so busy there. We weren't standing around. We were standing around, but we were working. There were people trying to steal stuff like crazy. I'm talking, that place brought out the best in people and brought out the worst too. There's always those type of people that'll rip people off, and people are trying to get in there to take advantage. There's a lot of free stuff coming in from all over the world. All kinds of charity stuff to help out the people there. Everybody wanted to do something. I remember a very well-known brand name blue jean, their top shelf blue jeans. A truckload of these came in, like a semi-truck came in full of these. And they were giving these out to everybody there that was working there on the site. Soldiers, firemen. There were other people, asbestos workers trying to remove the asbestos, communications teams, people that had a reason to be there, police officers. And they'd usually give you one, maybe two. You'd file in, tell them your pant size, and they'd give you a couple pair of these top shelf jeans. Well, wouldn't you know, there'd be people there, not in my guard unit, not firemen, just people that were there working. There were construction workers and people like that there too, clearing the place out. That tried to steal box loads of these. Well, my men, the guys I served with, I don't like to call them my men, the guys in my company and myself, we caught them. And we caught a lot of people. We apprehended quite a few people. And we took their stuff away from them and we gave it back. And sometimes we had people arrested, which wasn't hard to do there. You just called the police over and they took care of it from there. People were trying to get in with fake IDs. I don't know why. There was a lot of closed stores around there. Maybe they're trying to break into those stores to steal things. I don't know. I remember that. I remember just apprehending a lot of people that weren't supposed to be in there. This is pathetic. But we were told to be on the lookout for truck drivers because they were hauling away steel. All those steel girders. They were trying to clear the site out as they were searching. And they were in there. When I first got there, they were in there with dogs, search dogs. It was search and rescue, you know. Like I said, when I was there, all they found alive was a cat. And then it just became a cleanup effort, you know, very different type of cleanup effort because there was a lot of people in that pile. But all the steel that was the trade towers was being cut up and hauled away. And I heard that the mob was in there and diverting truckloads of steel to another place where they were profiting off the steel taken from the World Trade Center. That's what I heard. And I actually encountered things like that. But yeah, it was different. Well, our time came to leave, and I'm going to close this, and I know I'm going to forget things I wished I'd talked about. We bust out, they briefed us on post-traumatic stress before we left there, because every one of us that worked there, I talked to some of the guys, they had different things that really hit them pretty hard. And I had my moment, there was something there that bothered everybody there quite a bit. I saw the jet turbines get pulled out of the rubble, all black and beaten up. I saw a fire truck that was smashed. It was only a few feet tall. The only way you knew it used to be a fire truck is because the aluminum ladder on it was still intact but bent up like a piece of tin foil, you know, going up into the sky, all bent up. I seen them haul that out. I didn't take a lot. We weren't supposed to take pictures when we first got there. The firemen said they didn't want that place like a circus because it was a grave site for 344 of their fellows. And I understood that. You know, I took a few pictures here and there very discreetly. And so did some others, very discreetly. But you just didn't stand around there snapping pictures like a tourist. You know, if you took a picture, it was real discreet, you know. I didn't have a problem with that. We searched a lot. Towards the end, there was a lot of asbestos workers coming in. And a lot of them were, for some reason, Ukrainians and Russians. They were new immigrants to New York City. And they'd show us their ID, and they had the right ID, and they'd just say, they didn't speak English, they just say, asbestos worker, asbestos worker. And so that got to be like a running joke amongst us soldiers there. We go, asbestos worker. Or we'd make fun of the local New York City vernacular, how you doing? How you doing? How you doing? Forget about it. And we'd do that, you know. How you doing? How you doing? Hey. So we were briefed on post-traumatic stress before we left. And I didn't feel like I had any problems. I thought I weathered it very well. And then we got back to Cortland finally, turned in all our stuff, equipment. We didn't have any weapons to turn in. We held a formation, one more company, and I go, platoon, my platoon behind me, attention, cold beer. All of us would yell, and then dismissed, you know, and we all went home. Got out of our uniforms, went back to our civilian lives. And I got home, I was living on Congress Street. I did a story about that house, haunted as heck. I wasn't worried about that at that point. I was there in my living room, all alone, and I sat down on the couch that day, and then it just all came, blam! The whole experience just came falling down on me like an avalanche. And I broke down and cried like a baby. Well, I wouldn't go that far. I wept pretty good hard for maybe 30 minutes. All the grief, I soaked all that up, you know, all the grief. I don't know if the other guys did, but I felt like a sponge. It felt like a magnifying glass for grief there. And here's what happened to my teaching career. And this is a grievance, it still is. My school, SUNY Cortland, said, you've missed 16 days of class. And you're going to have to redo this semester, next semester, in the spring of '02. We allow you to formally withdraw, and I did. And then I went back to student teaching the next semester to finish it up. And I did just that. I student taught at a different school. Took all my tests, passed everything, ready to get on with my life as a fully qualified high school teacher, English high school teacher in New York State, that I'd worked so hard to do. I went to graduate, and SUNY Cortland said they put a block on my academic account, and I wasn't allowed to graduate until I paid them back $3,404 of my loan from the fall of 2001 that defaulted because I was absent from class. They said, you were absent from classes, this portion of your loan defaulted, we paid it off, but now you owe us that money, $3,404, part of my federal loan, Stafford loan. And SUNY paid it off. They never told me about it. They never asked me anything. It was brand new. This is the first I ever heard from it, was when I went to graduate and get on with my life as a teacher. And they said, no, you're not graduating until you pay us $3,404. And I was livid, because SUNY works for New York State. And New York State's top boss is the governor of New York. The governor of New York ordered me out of class to military duty at the Trade Center. And I followed those orders. And I did exactly what my college told me to do when I came back. I withdrew formally, and then I went back to class the next semester, finished everything, and now I'm supposed to be a high school English teacher, and they're going to tell me that I can't graduate until I pay them back $3,404 for serving the state, for doing what their boss told me to do. You know, I knew going to the Trade Center was going to put my teaching career behind by maybe a year. I did it anyway. Might put me in harm's way. I did it anyway. I did my duty, like everybody else that went there. I mean, others did their duty there, and they lost their lives. So I'm lucky, I know, but just the same, I felt that my state had backstabbed me, and I didn't have $3,400. I don't know what planet these people were on. I mean, I'm student teaching. That means I don't have a job. You don't moonlight when you're student teaching. Your entire focus has to be on your classroom. So I don't have a job. And I just finished student teaching again, you know, finished it all up the spring of '02, you know, May of 2002. Finished it all up well in aces. And they told me I couldn't graduate. And I didn't have $3,404. In fact, I didn't know anybody that did, personally. And in fact, I thought that they were wrong to do this. I said, look, let me graduate, let me get a job teaching, then I'm happy, I'm doing what I went to school for, I'm making money, I'm making a paycheck, and I can pay you back, and you're happy. I'm going to be teaching in New York State, so you know where to find me. They wouldn't budge. They treated me like, I swear, it was their demeanor towards me was so disrespectful. They didn't care if I was sent to 9/11, and I even had some of them tell me, straight out, said, we don't care. You got to pay us this. I'm mad if you can't tell, I'm sorry. Because that's why I'm working at Walmart now, when I should be retiring, not just with my military pension, but my New York State teaching pension, which is pretty darn good, and Social Security. This was my plan when I was like in my 30s, and I did everything I was supposed to do. But between the terrorists and New York State bureaucracy, I guess God had other plans for me. I just wanted to share that little bit, a gripe, which is really, I don't know, I just wanted to share it. Sorry. New York State bureaucracy. I took it to court. It really took me a long time to get New York State in court. I managed to take him to a federal court here in New York State in Syracuse about three years ago to this date. And I represented myself because I didn't have any money 3 years ago either. And wouldn't you know, Albany, New York, the Attorney General's office sent their hound dogs down there, their attorneys, to represent New York State. And they took me apart. They took apart my character. They made me out to be just a deadbeat slacker. Honestly, I found out what lawyers, big city lawyers, can do. And the judge was sympathetic with me, but they did what you call character assassination on me. They were so good at it in this court, I actually was impressed. I was about as impressed with him as I was angry. So it got nowhere. Oh well. So that's my 9/11 stories, experience. And I wanted to share it. And you know, there's injustice goes on every day where people are murdered and bad things happen to good people. And that's what happened on 9/11. But I wanted to share that. It left quite an imprint on me, and every single person that I served with, I know it left an imprint on them. Oh, by the way, you've seen in some of my videos hanging on the wall, the only military thing that I really esteem, and that would be my medal. I'll put pictures up. My World Trade Center medal I got from New York State, and this nice service saying that I was there. That's what's hanging on the wall behind me in some of my videos. And I'll put some videos up of that. Here's pictures of those. And finally, I'm going to do something unusual. There's a poem I used to like. This was 20 years ago. Picture off. There's a poem I'm going to read to you called Herbst. It's a German poem. It was written by Rainer Rilke, Marie Rilke, around 1907, somewhere around there. And it's called Herbst, which means fall or autumn. And I'm going to read this in German because something's lost. I've read the English translations and some of the meter and stuff is lost in the translation. I'm going to read it in German, and I'm going to write also on the screen what the translation is to it. And it really, to me, is the poem that goes with my 9/11 experience. Bear with me in the German. Herbst by Rainer Marie Rilke. Written around 1907, something like that. I'll put this stuff up. Die Blätter fallen wie von weit, als welkten in dem Himmel ferner Gärten. Sie fallen mit weinender Gebärde. Und in den Nacken fällt die schwere Erde aus allen Stirnen in die Einsamkeit. Wir alle fallen, dieser Hahn da fällt, und sieh der andere an, es ist in allen. Und doch ist einer, welcher diese fallen und ähnlich sanft in seinen Händen hält. Thank you. God bless each of you.